Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Are we awake? Ready to go? My name's Tim Petersen. I'm a cattle rancher here in Arizona. And from what I understand, you folks are all new farmers and ranchers, or people that are wanting to get into the business. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why would you want to do that? Anyways, trying to be funny. I'm here to work 6 to 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. Cattle ranching and farming is not a business, it's a lifestyle. That's what I tell myself to keep going. So, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was raised in Arizona, and my dad, my great-grandfather owned 3 butcher shops in Chicago. My grandfather was a butcher, and my dad became a carpenter, and which is strange. But he worked at, he was a ranch carpenter. He did a lot of carpenter work at different ranches. Have you ever heard of the McCormick Ranch in Scottsdale?
Yes.
The Gady Ranch, those actually used to be cattle ranches. And those are some of the ranches that he worked on. So growing up in Arizona, we were always in the outdoors and always around ranches and hunting and fishing and all that fun stuff. In the 1980s, I got involved in the real estate appraisal business and took a real liking to appraising farmland and appraising ranches. So I learned, got a good understanding of the valuation side and the numbers side of farming and ranching, but never was technically a rancher. And in the 1990s, I started a ranch in Humboldt, Arizona called the Round Mountain Ranch, and that's where we raised and trained mules. And I was a contractor and got involved in construction, kind of got out of the appraisal business. And then we had the Round Mountain Ranch. We had a few cows, but it was mostly mules and training mules. And then the housing market crashed in 2008. How many remember that? The second Great Depression. So as an appraiser, as a home builder, as a developer, a consultant, any knowledge that I had attained over the previous 25 years meant nothing to anybody because people just weren't building homes and they weren't developing real estate. So I had to make a decision to stick it out for 10 years or shift gears and do something different. And I had friends that were in the ranching business, and I literally got into the ranching business full time about 10 years ago. Using the knowledge that I had obtained as an appraiser, understanding the numbers, understanding how cow-calf operations work, and the feeder stocker and the different types. I think I appraised a couple of feedlots and had a lot of information. So I went from being a very successful home builder, developer, retired real estate appraiser, mule trainer, mule packer, blah, 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 to working in the meat department at Bash's in Camp Verde, Arizona for $9 an hour. And that's okay, because starting at the bottom is a good thing. There's not a darn thing wrong with it. And every business I've started at the bottom, and it's definitely paid off having that knowledge. So I decided that we were going to do this cattle ranching thing full time. Decided I kind of wanted to get into the beef industry a little bit. At that time, you were hearing, terms like grass-fed beef, natural, cattle that are raised in feedlots, but no antibiotics, no hormones, growth hormones, etc. And farmers markets were kind of coming online. Sprouts and Whole Foods were starting to come online. And I kind of saw this opportunity to develop a beef company that told a story and basically gave the consumer what I thought they were asking for. And very simply put, when you start a business, you interpret the market. That's what I did as an appraiser, and that's what I did as somebody getting into the agriculture industry. And I could hear more and more people talking about the health benefits of grass-fed, the health benefits of a natural program, and these great farmers markets that were online and Sprouts, and you could kind of see this thing starting to build, right? So I support the entire cattle industry. I don't ever talk negative about growth hormones, antibiotics, everything we do in the cattle industry, I back and support. I just found a niche called grass-fed beef. I'm not here to talk to you about what they do in feedlots and what they don't do and how they grow crops that they feed cattle in feedlots. I can tell you what the market tells me, and I can tell you how to tell your story and sell your product. I can also tell you that if you're getting into this industry, it's a great industry to get into because I think it's growing. I think more and more and more people, especially after seeing the food security issues we've had here over the last few years during this pandemic, people just straight out want to know where their food's coming from. I think people, for the most part, the consumer doesn't have a great trust for the pendulum that's we call big ag, okay? And I don't want to talk about big ag. We need big ag. We have hundreds of millions of people to feed in this world, and we need things. We need to create a lot of affordable food, right? We all agree with that. I'm going to try this. So start out at bashes, $9 an hour. Go home, watch YouTube videos till midnight. Did that for several years. There's something about genetics, my great-grandfather and my grandfather, and something about that whole processing and butchering thing that came alive inside of myself. And the internet's a wonderful thing. It allows us to educate ourselves. It allows us to market. We can learn a lot off the internet. So I actually used the University of Arizona in Tucson. They have a USDA inspected processing facility down there, and I used to haul my cows all the way to Tucson from Camp Verde, Arizona, and I wanted to process my animals under USDA inspection. If anybody tells you that there's no difference between state inspected beef and USDA inspected beef, I will tell you there is a difference. I have my own USDA inspected plant in Chino Valley, Arizona, and I have my own USDA inspected commercial kitchen in Camp Verde. And I started hauling these cattle down to the University of Arizona. I was sitting in farmers markets and trying to analyze all this, and there's not a whole lot of money to be made in the farmers markets. It's not bad, but I kind of felt like it was a bigger vision, So I got the first ranch going in the Bradshaw Mountains. Now we have 2 ranches in the Bradshaw Mountains, and I used the same concept that I used as a builder and a developer, and I found ranches that were just run down, just completely run down. Because if you guys have gotten on the internet lately and priced ranches, they start in the $2 to $2.5, $3 million range, and most of those ranches don't even really cash flow. You've got to run 600 to 1,000 mother cows to really cash flow a ranch like that. That's a big nut to crack every month, a couple $1 million. I'm here to tell you that I started a cow-calf operation, and I've run cow-calf operations for a lot of years, and there's just not a lot of money in cow-calf operations. There's a lot of different things you can do with calves, and backgrounding them and preconditioning them and all those things you can get into, but at the end of the day, there's really not a lot of money in cow-calf operations. It's a lot of work. It's a very satisfying job. Being a rancher and being a cowboy it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of really hard work. So I focused on ranches that I could buy for 40-50 cents on the dollar, because I didn't want to have to debt service a $2 million loan on a ranch, especially starting a ranch off. It takes time to get those cattle acclimated to the ranch, get them calving, get those calf percentages up. So we started the first ranch about 10 years ago, leased it, and then eventually bought it, and really focused on Angus cattle, and we bred a little bit of the Corriente cattle into some of the cattle that were living in the rough part of the ranch, and really tried to develop a genetic that was a good beef cow. Then after a while, the grass-fed beef business started growing. The U of A is a wonderful place. They're a college. They do wonderful, wonderful things, but to be in the grass-fed beef business, to be in the beef business, the business of selling beef to restaurants and consumers, there's a lot of things you have to control. And I finally figured out that although slaughtering cattle down there was great, I needed to have my own plant. So let's see what the next picture brings, because I don't have these memorized. So this is my grandson. He's a third generation rancher. All my kids work in our business, and these are some of the cattle we have on pasture down in Camp Verde. We do background a lot of calves and put them on different ranches and grow them into phenomenal grass-fed beef cattle. And so doing the farmers markets, making the trek down to the U of A every other week, flat tires, oil changes, fuel, all that stuff, that's all cost prohibitive. I was very blessed and able to become the first grass-fed beef company or small beef company in Arizona to be with a national retail chain, Natural Grocers. And the very first natural grocers that came to Arizona, we were able to land some business with them. I started working with a company called Stern Produce. You heard of Stern Produce? They're also a food service company. They had at the time a USDA inspected processing. They didn't slaughter the cattle or kill the cattle, but they would take the primals and the subprimals and they would turn those into cut steaks, cut and packaged steaks and ground beef and all the different shapes and sizes that we needed. And so I was able to get on with this smaller company called Stern, and I was able to get into natural grocers, and that was a big deal at the time. We're in natural grocers, woo! That was a big deal. So, but then we realized that there's a thing called carcass utilization. Anybody know what that is? Anybody know what carcass utilization is? So carcass utilization is simply this. You've killed a steer or a fat butcher cow, and she's hanging on the rail, and she's hanging at about 700 pounds. That's her hanging weight. She's completely processed, split in half, and that's what you've got to deal with, is that 700-pound carcass. And you have a chef that calls you on the phone and says, Tim, we would love to have 300 pounds a week at your truck roast. And you're going, but that animal right there only has about 25 to 30 pounds of chuck roast on her. So I'd love to sell you 300 pounds a week, but what am I going to do with the rest of the animal? You guys get that, where I'm going with this? 70 to 75, sometimes as high as 80% of our carcass is what we call boneless trim, which goes into ground beef. So a lot of people talk in very round terms about selling beef direct to the market, and it's a good thing to do, and you can figure it out. But when you're killing, every time you process one of those animals, you've got 75% of that animal, which is ground beef. You've got to find a home for that, And then another chef says, "Oh, we love your ribeye steaks, and we'd love to have 50, 60 pounds a week." Well, that cow really only produces about 24 to 26 pounds of ribeyes. So what do you do with the rest of the carcass? You guys follow me? So there are definitely some challenges. Carcass utilization is probably the first thing, because you don't want to have a lot of product that you're freezing. And in the first few years, I think at one time I had almost 4,000 pounds of ground beef stored up in a freezer, because I was selling the rest of the animal. And those are all growing pains. Those are things that you have to go through. If you want to be a small producer and just sell a couple of animals a week, you still have to find a place to sell all that ground beef. What we do with ground beef is we turn it into different shapes. We have bricks for retail. We have 4 different hamburger patties. We have chubs, 5-pound chubs and 20-pound chubs. We make taco, chorizo, breakfast, and Italian beef sausage. So we've added organic seasonings to the ground beef. And we also are getting ready to launch 3 different types of what we call formed beef jerky. We're going to have 3 different types of whole muscle beef jerky and 3 different types of whole. Why the formed beef jerky? Because it helps us get rid of ground beef. And if we're gonna slaughter 40, 50 cows a week, that's a lot of ground beef, right? So these are all things I'm just trying to let you guys know that there are challenges to it. And let's see what our next slide says. That's my grandson again. I'm kind of like my grandson. You might see him in here. He's 9 years old, and he's a better cowboy than I am. So our company basically started in that realm of trying to sell to restaurants, trying to sell retail, trying to sell over the internet, and just trying to figure out where to sell the beef. One day I walked into a small exempt slaughter plant in Chino Valley. A friend of mine owned it, and people would come out to my farm in Camp Verde and they'd want to buy a whole beef. And so I'd let them pick out the beef that they wanted. You like that black one? Okay. And because I had sold that to that customer as a live animal, I could then kill it at an exempt plant. It'd be not for resale. And they basically bought the cow, and they were actually technically hiring this company in Chino Valley to slaughter. And I was getting this natural grocers and doing a few farmers markets and growing with natural grocers. They had, I think they built, 14 stores in Arizona? And the company was growing slowly but surely, but I knew that I had to have my own slaughter plant in order to control all this stuff. So one day I'm in my acquaintance in the shop, and he's lost his mind. He's using every word in the book, and I have 3 hernias, and I have this, and I'm done. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I said, "You mean you're completely done with this plant?" "I'm done. I am done." And I happened to be able to take that plant, remodel it, and about 9 years ago, I was able to open my own USDA inspected plant. That was quite an adventure. I don't know that I'd ever want to do it again. It's a lot of work. You may have heard that the federal government is making available anywhere from $600 million to $1 billion available in affordable loans to build more small USDA plants. That's a good thing. It creates competition for the big 4 processors. It kind of helps that pendulum swing back to the small ag and to what I do, and it sounds like maybe what you folks would like to do with beef or poultry or farming, vegetables, or whatever you're into. So once we got that plant, we never really used the plant full time, and it took a couple of years to get the business ramped up, and it took a lot of capital to turn that into a USDA inspected plant. And then then it's just like a normal business that grows. It's progression. The ranch grew, and then we bought another ranch. And one day I got tired of throwing all these bones away, throwing all these bones in the dumpster. I'm thinking, these are wonderful marrow bones. And so we started doing research on bone broth. You guys familiar with beef bone broth? So I used to sell beef to a small restaurant, Camp Verde, and they closed down, and they had a little kitchen back there. And back then you didn't have to do bone broth under USDA inspection. So we started making bone broth. So we started shipping all the bones over to Camp Verde and bought a couple of pots and started making bone broth. And before we knew it, we had bone broth in all of the natural grocery stores in the western United States. And then they wanted chicken bone broth. We're like, what the heck? We're cattle ranchers, but we can make chicken bone broth because we got to make money, So we started making chicken bone broth. And then we learned a term called predatory distribution. This is all this fun stuff you get to learn as you're building your agriculture companies. And when you ship product to that many stores, and you're shipping and you get successful in this business, you have to rely on distributors, okay? And you've got to find distributors like Shamrock Foods and Cisco Foods and to distribute your product, okay? Unless you just want to do real small, which is fine. I'm kind of giving you our story. And we found out that the distributor was buying bone broth from a co-packer who was making this watered down, cheaper bone broth, and they were selling that to natural grocers, and they could make a better margin on it. So they jacked our bone broth up to like $18 a quart. And they can do that because they're the distributor. So all of a sudden the bone broth sales start to dwindle, and I'm walking in the natural grocer stores and I see my bone broth at $18 a quart. I'm like, what's going on? You know? And so found out what I call it predatory distribution. And they basically put us out of business to sell their cheaper co-packed bone broth. And that's a hard lesson to learn, but it happens. You say, I talk to people at cattle growers all the time. We need to build more plants. We need to bring more Arizona beef to the market. Okay, so go open a USDA plant or a state inspected plant, and you go to a company called Shamrock Foods. You guys know who Shamrock Foods are? It took me 5 years to get Shamrock Foods, and I actually had to run a delivery truck 350 hours a day, 350 miles a day, 6 days a week, and actually start stealing business from them. Because chefs really do want that local grown, grass-fed, or local grown product. And after a while, Shamrock Foods realized that we were stealing business, and I told Shamrock Foods, I'll buy 5 more delivery trucks, and we'll just keep growing this company until you guys decide you want to distribute our product. And they finally came on board. We turned a bunch of the restaurants back over to them, but then they come up with, you've got to have the same amount of liability insurance than what we have. These are all fun things you get to learn. So you're selling beef to Shamrock, they're selling it to a restaurant, somebody gets sick in the restaurant. Shamrock Foods wants you to have the same target on your head that they have, liability-wise. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of folks that want to build slaughter plants and want to start selling beef, but they don't realize the expenses and the cost that goes into it. I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just telling you the truth. And so now we have to carry $13, $14, $15 million worth of liability insurance, the same liability insurance that Big Shamrock Foods has. You want to go work for Cisco Foods? You got to do the same thing. Got to have a metal detector. All your ground beef has to go through a metal detector. So Arizona grass-raised beef has gone through a lot of learning curves in the last 10 years. I don't regret a minute of it. We're a very successful business, and but I want to kind of give you guys some facts, you know, about being in the beef business. I can't tell you a lot about farming, but I can tell you about what we do. It is a family business. My middle daughter, is quite a cowgirl, and her husband help run the ranches along with another cow boss that we have. We've had as many as 4 cattle ranches. We have 3 farms now, and he's a 3rd generation, and he is quite a little rancher, a little cowboy. My oldest daughter works at the slaughter plant. She does payroll, and she drives a delivery truck sometimes. My youngest daughter runs our commercial kitchen, and my son, who's 18, he trains horses for the ranch and does a lot of horse trading for himself. He grew up working at the slaughter plant, at the kitchen, and all the kids grew up in the family. My wife helps me keep my brain together. Like I forgot some of these figures this morning, and I called her on the phone and said, I forgot something, and she laughs, and she helps me keep track of all the cows, and it's a family business, okay? So we do work on our own ranches. This is Reuben. Reuben is probably 64 years old now. He's had hip replacement, knee replacement, and he still rides horses and still helps us work cattle. I used to be a bodyguard, and I used to be a bouncer, and I don't really back down from a lot of guys. I back down from that guy. He's just a mean son of a gun. he's just been a cowboy his whole life, and he's just fearless. This is one of our pastures in Camp Verde, and we do take cattle and background them and put them on pastures that we just grow native grass on. I call them little micro pastures. There's my grandson again. More cattle. So this is the Turkey Creek Ranch. We gather cattle. These are some of the calves that we sort off. So we're basically a cow calf cattle ranching organization who realized that there were kind of thin profit margins in cattle ranching, realized the consumer's need and want for a local grown product, and decided that grass-fed beef was the niche we wanted to be in. I think there's riches in niches. I really like that little term. JBS right over here in Petersen, they slaughter 300 cattle an hour. 300 cattle an hour. And that's just one of their plants, and I think they have 6 of them globally. I don't want to do what JBS is doing. I want to do a niche. I want to do grass-fed. You know, they can do a natural program, but it'd be really hard for them to do a grass-fed program. Grass-fed cattle take 30 to 35% longer to get fat and get marbled up and, you know, become palatable. Let's see, I just want to make sure I'm covering everything. People say, Tim, do you have organic beef? And I tell them that our cattle are actually better than organic. Organic basically means that you have a defined pasture, and that defined pasture, no matter how big or how small, has been certified organic, okay? Between our ranches, 3 Indian tribes, and about 23 other partner ranchers, our grass-fed cattle come off of about 6 million acres of Arizona rangeland. The Navajo Nation is what, 22 million acres? I buy a lot of cattle from the Padre Mesa Ranch up there. They are all have signed affidavits. We are third-party verified through the American Grass-Fed Beef Association, which means that what you're reading on my label isn't something I just made up. Because you guys know there's a lot of honesty in advertising and in labeling, right? There's just a lot of BS. So I wanted to be third party verified, and I want another party outside of my company to say Arizona grass raised beef is grass fed, grass finished. Okay? So we have a veterinarian that audits these ranches. We have another product called Tribal Lands Beef. We sell to the casinos, and I'll buy those cattle from either the Apache folks or the Walpais or the Navajo. And that beef gets circumvented right into our Tribal Lands Beef product. We tried to get a couple of tribes to do that on their own. They really didn't have an interest, but we saw the market, and so that's kind of how we developed that. So our cattle are not organic, but they're better than organic because this ranch right here is our smallest ranch, and it's 22,000 acres. I personally run cattle on about 250,000 acres. How much more organic is 250,000 acres of Arizona rangeland? I mean, you can't fertilize, or you can't go out in the national forest or go out on your BLM grazing permit and mess with the soil. You'll get put in prison. It's what nature grows. You know, it's with the sun and the wind and the rain and everything is natural. It's better than organic. You guys all understand what I'm saying? So I never decided to go organic because it's as natural as it gets. In our kitchen, we do bone broth. We make tallow. That carcass, we have a home for the blood. And what I mean is we make money off of the blood, the spleen, the kidney, the oxtail, the tongue, the liver, the heart, the cheek meat, and of course, short ribs. We try to take that carcass and try to squeeze every dime we can out of that animal's life. And the blood goes to medical research. That's slowing down a little bit because of the COVID deal. We sell liver, kidney, oh boy, what else? Heart, all on the internet, and it's gone. Our inferior cuts go to the beef jerky line, because sometimes these grass-fed cattle, see, they're different than commodities cattle because they're raised out in this rangeland. And sure, they have genetic. They don't go to a feed lot where they're fed this high protein, high carbohydrate diet. this ration, and they're not grown to 1,300 pounds, and they're not graded. Grass-fed beef is not graded. You guys have heard of prime, choice, and select, right? Different grades. USDA doesn't recognize a grade for grass-fed cattle. So in our plant, we grade our own cattle. We have butchers from Mexico, butchers from Italy, butchers from New Zealand, and butchers that were born here in America. And we've used all of that knowledge to develop this grass-fed beef product. Most feedlots will put an animal out at 1,300 pounds, 1,350 pounds, plus or minus. They're graded, they're bred for genetics, they're bred to grade high. I'm dealing with animals that come off different ranches that eat different types of native forage, and sometimes they grade out a little bit better than others. So I'm not grading for choice or selling to a prime market. I'm just selling grass-fed. Most of the commodities industry, people are selling steers, okay? Steers are weaned, they're backgrounded, they're sent to a feedlot, and they get fed into a butcher animal, okay? I started selling steers, grass-fed steers, the first 2 years I was in business. And if I had continued doing that, I'd be out of business today. Steers that weigh 1,100 to 1,200 pounds that come off rangeland are very tough. And that's one of the biggest complaints with grass-fed beef, is that grass-fed beef is tough. Have you ever heard that? Tastes a little gamey, it's kind of tough. So what's the cure to that? Raise that steer to maybe 800, 900 pounds, a little bit younger animal, a little more tender, right? Problem, no flavor, okay? Flavor in beef comes from marbling, intramuscular fat. You guys have a ribeye steak and it's got all that good marbling in it. It's probably gonna have some good flavor profiles. But if it's grass-fed and it's a steer and it's an old mama cow, she's gonna be as tough as a boot, okay? So I locked myself in an apartment out on a ranch in New Mexico for a week and a half, and I studied the way grass-fed beef is served in Europe. And I changed my whole plan. And the success of Arizona grass-raised beef is we slaughter, on the average, a 1,400-pound cow. And she's typically 4 to 8 years old. It's my humble belief and humble opinion. You don't have to agree, but I'm the one that's making money doing this, so we're growing every year, so there's something going on. My humble opinion, chronological age in the grass-fed beef arena is what creates flavor, okay? And so it's hard for a 900 pound steer to have really any marbling. When I used to do custom processing at our plant, which I don't have time to do anymore, I'd look at a lot of these 800-pound steers that people would bring that they were selling as grass-fed beef, not to be negative, but this is what they sold. And then next to it would be this 1,400-pound, 4 or 5 year old carcass that was a cow. The fat's that thick. It's yellow because it's loaded with carotene. This 900-pound animal here was fed on grass, pasture, or in the range. It's got no fat. It's very lean. And you cut it open and there's no marbling, but it's tender, okay? But I want flavor. And when you go to Shamrock Foods and you go to Cisco Foods and you go to the farmers markets, there's one thing you really want to hear is that your beef tastes great. And the first thing that people say about our beef is, man, that tastes like real beef. And it's my opinion that we're growing cattle a little too fast, these feedlots with the growth hormones and the rations we're giving them, and they're slaughtering these cattle at under 30 months of age, okay? So one of the most expensive steaks you'll buy in Europe is what they call vaca vieja. And that just basically means old cow. and there's a lot of places in Europe you can buy a steak, a ribeye steak that came off of a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old fat cow, a breaker cow that's really fat. That steak's got marbling in it. And the flavor profile isn't for everybody, but the key is a term called dry aging, okay? And And so when I started selling cows, I took care of a little bit of the toughness problem, but I started getting some great flavor out of this beef. But it was still a little bit on the tough side. So when you go to Shamrock Foods or Cisco Foods and you sit down with an executive chef and you watch them put your patty or your steak next to one they got from, say, JBS or Creekside, one of these competitors, commodities, and they're checking out the sizzle, the smell. I mean, they're into it. They're watching the sizzle, they're watching the cook time, and then the funnest thing is to watch them eat it. And these you know, the chew and the bite, and they really get into this stuff. I sit down, I pick up a cheeseburger, and it's gone in 2 seconds flat. In fact, one of the biggest things that really irritates me is when I have lunch with somebody, and they pick up a cheeseburger, and they take a bite, and they put it back down. Don't put that burger down. Eat it, let's get going. Okay? But these chefs, I mean, they chew this beef, and they bite. And this is big stuff for these guys. This is big stuff. And I'm watching this going, oh my God. So they say, well, your steak's a little tough. So I'm just going to keep talking until my time's up. I'm trying to teach you as much as I can about this, okay? Because these are important things. There's some of our big yellow. See all the fat on those? See the marbling? That's prime. That's a grass-fed, grass-finished animal. See the marbling? You don't get that in a 2-3-year-old animal. Now, that's a very general statement. You can put them on certain kind of grasses that are high in protein, we could go all over. We can talk about carbohydrates and protein and where grass is grown. This is an Arizona grass-raised animal raised on Arizona rangeland, okay? But that's grass-fed. See the yellow? See how much darker the yellow is? That's a little bit older cow. See the marbling? She's had more time to build this intramuscular fat off of grass finishing. A little bit lighter, pretty good marbling, but not like that. So the cows, in my humble opinion, put intramuscular fat on faster. If they're fat on the hoof, they're probably going to be somewhat fat intramuscular, especially if they have 4, 5, 6 years of age on them. So I developed the dry age program. Locked myself in an apartment on a ranch in New Mexico and studied dry aging. Watched all the YouTube videos, built a dry age cooler, and I would put our steak next to any commodity steak. And we do. And we're doubling in size every year. So everything I'm saying is, you can talk all you want, but you got to have the proof. And our company, I'm not bragging, this is what we do. But I'm teaching a different method than what a lot of you have been taught about feedlots and steers versus cows. Because a lot of old cowboys look at me and go, "Man, you are crazy." It's like, no, this is how it's done. This is the way it's done in Europe, and a lot of places in Europe. 4 years old to 8 years old, great flavor, great marbling, a little tougher. So you got a dry age. Does dry age cost money? Sure, time is money. Our steaks are dry aged 38 days. Did we jump right into that? No, we started out with 15, 16, 20, 28, and we found the 38 days, 32 degrees, a lot of airflow, perfect humidity. A lot went into developing that. It makes such a difference in how your steaks come out. We can needle tenderize, mechanical tenderize, grind beef. The patty that I served took 6 months to develop. If you've ever watched a patty machine, most of the places use what's called the one-arm bandit. It just punches the patties out. See, in grass-fed beef, you don't want to take that beef and compress it. Remember, it's already kind of on the tough side. So we double grinded, and we bought a patty machine from Europe. Costs a lot of money, but it ladles the ground beef into a mold that turns. So it's not being pressed. So when that chef picks up that patty and bites into it, that bite now, that chew, they love it because it's very it's got a little airiness to it. You're actually able to chew it. Because the big problem with grass-fed beef is it's a little bit on the tough side. So how much time do I have?
You're over, but keep clicking
Oh,
through.
I'm over? Okay. Let's see what we got. So this is dry, this is how we label all of our primals. You gotta have a date, lot number, ribeye, 30 plus. That means the animal was over 30 months old. Different set of rules. There's some of our steaks in production. There's our bone broth, all organic vegetables. We make tallow, we make beef tallow, now we make pork tallow, we make bison tallow, we make humane certified tallow and soon organic certified. This is the dry aged cooler. See a little bit of hair that's growing on here? That means it's just about ready. This is some of the greener stuff. But that's, in my opinion, that's the secret to making great grass-fed beef steaks. See the marbling? Everything's got marbling in it. There's a nice cow. That's one of our farms in Camp Verde. There's old Reuben again. Pandemic-wise, it put our website on steroids. People are walking into grocery stores. Shelves are empty. The consumer, I think, has realized, and the federal government has realized, that we do have some food security issues. The federal government is giving out these loans to build more plants. Maybe that's some of the stuff you guys are interested in. I sit on a few advisory panels. Running a USDA plant is very expensive, so just be careful. I would advise going with a mobile slaughter plant if you want to get into the slaughtering business. Questions? Yes?
When you said hair on the carcass, I presume that's mold?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of mold. Yeah, a little mold. And so the ribeyes, we leave the fat cap on, and we leave the bones on the New York strips and the bones. It helps protect that meat. You don't get the loss. Because dry aging, you can get some loss, some moisture loss.
What's the name of the grass that you grow?
The what?
The name of the grass that you grow?
The grass?
Yeah.
So different ranches have different native grasses. I don't plant grass.
Oh, yeah.
Everything I grow is native.
Natural.
Yeah, just like that pasture you saw, that's Johnson grass, which probably isn't the best. There's some wild Bermuda in there. And I haven't planted any of these pastures. So, yes, sir.
Really quick, when you mentioned you background the calves, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so you can wean a calf at 400 pounds, and those calves are sold at price per pound. So a 500 pound calf should bring more money than a 400 pound calf. So we background our calves for two reasons. We do have to sell some of our calves to cash flow the ranch. And if you have pasture available, you can put those calves on that pasture for say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever you desire. Our calves are typically weaned at about 400 pounds. And then when we do sell them, we probably put about 100 pounds on them. And so we background them in another ranch or another pasture strictly to put more weight on. Preconditioning, some people will feed their calves. They'll put mineral, a little salt in the feed, get them nice and fat, get them shiny. When you're a feedlot and you're buying calves to feed, it's all about cost to feed and cost to gain. If you want to get that calf to gain, say, 2 pounds a day, what's the cost of that 2 pounds? What's the cost of the commodities, the labor? So you want those calves to hit that feedlot running on the gain, so to speak. When you wean a calf, that calf is used to being on its mother, and it nibbles a little bit on grass. People say, oh, cattle are grass-fed. I don't know about that. Calves will nibble on grass, but their primary diet is mama's milk. You wean the calf, and you ship it straight to the sale barn, and then and then the buyers, the feedlot people buy that calf, right? Well, that calf just came off mama's milk, 2-3 days ago. It's going through the stress of being weaned, possibly branded, possibly castrated. It sits in a pen in balls for 2 or 3 days after it's been weaned off its mama. It's been shipped to a sale barn. It's been run through a sale barn ring. It's been loaded in a truck and then shipped to a feedlot. That's a lot of stress for a 400-pound calf. So we like to take our calves, work them, put them back on mama, then wean them, then background them, and maybe do some preconditioning. A lot of guys will give them, we vaccinate all of our calves. Some people do big, 7-way, 3 different types of vaccination. Feedlots like that because they don't have to spend that money then to vaccinate those cattle. So it's a whole concept of a calf going to the sale barn, somewhat stress-free. There's stress in all of it, but that calf hits the ground running and gaining. That's what they want. They don't want the calf to drop off for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 and then start back up again. It costs the feedlot money. So backgrounding and preconditioning is getting the calf acclimated and growing off of its mama in general terms.
There's a lot of people in here trying to find a way to make money quick, and they don't know whether to do farmers markets or sell restaurants. Would you tell them why you gave up all of that during the pandemic and just went with online?
Yeah, so, I told you about the predatory distribution. It's like, what? We make this great bone broth. You don't want it anymore? In retail, guys, 99% of the time, the bottom line is the dollar. It's pennies and nickels. AJ's, Bashes, we met with them 5-6 times. They buy their grass-fed beef from Uruguay. One reason only, it's cheap. It's all about pennies and nickels. We were in Albertsons for a while, but then they closed up. Could never get into Whole Foods, could never get into Sprouts. They just don't want to pay me enough money. I know what it costs to raise that animal. I know what it costs to either raise it or purchase it. I know what it costs to slaughter. I know what my costs are. I know what my numbers are. Why do I want to lose money? So, in my opinion again, the best profit margins in this game is online direct-to-consumer sales. And you've got to tell your story. Don't be afraid to talk about you and talk about your ranches and talk about your grandson, because people love that stuff. They want to know where their food is coming from. Don't talk negatively about other ways, other producers. We need everybody in this business. So when the pandemic hit, our online business just went crazy, and that they put it on steroids, so to speak. Bottom line is, I started looking at the profit margins in the online business versus the natural grocers retailer, and I literally called natural grocers and said, hey, love you guys, but we're done, because we're making more money at direct sales. We raised the price of our ground beef to Shamrock and Cisco and said, you don't like it? It's okay. Because at the end of the day, those chefs that buy our product, they've put a lot of time and money into marketing that story. And they feel like that's why the people come to the restaurant. They want to connect with the food. They want to know where the food is coming from. So tell your story, and don't be afraid to knock on natural grocer's door and say, bye-bye. And yeah.
After you vaccinate a cow, how long do you have to wait to put it on the market?
After what?
Vaccinate them.
Well, they're vaccinated as calves. I don't sell beef that's, most of my cattle are 4 or 5, 6-year-old cows. So they're vaccinated as calves. So it's a lot of years actually. So.
Oh, you don't have to vaccinate them every year?
No,
Oh,
no, you don't have to. We vaccinate our calves. So sometimes we'll vaccinate our mama cows if we feel like they need to be protected against something. I try to stay away from as much stuff as I can, So I'm not saying, there's a lot of ranchers that vaccinate their mama cows every year. Not worried about vaccines. Most of your growth hormones, most of your antibiotics are in and out of the system in 30 days. There's a lot of scare techniques in this stuff. So antibiotics are a good thing. Cow gets sick, give it an antibiotic. But you gotta wait 30, 60, 90 days before you slaughter it. That's true in any slaughterhouse. We actually do our own testing because we have our own plant. We test all of the kidneys for antibiotic residue. The USDA can do that on a random scale, but we do it almost every week, just to cover ourselves. You know.
Question, you say you don't castrate the bulls?
We do, yes.
Oh, okay.
So how do you ship in terms of, shipping all
Yep.
across?
So our kitchen has an area where we have to get dry ice delivered every week. We have special boxes with insulated panels in them, dry ice, and we ship out of our kitchen in Camp Verde. So all the product is manufactured in Chino Valley. It's shipped down to Camp Verde. The orders are taken every day and every night and shipped to the office. And then we ship all over the country out of our location in Camp Verde.
So you use FedEx or UPS?
Yeah, UPS.
UPS?
Yep. They show up at our doorstep every afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
You were